Welcome back, my beautiful raindrops, to my enchanted cabin. Join me by the fire with a warm glass of tea and a blanket as the story of the fairy ring continues. Tiki sat on the hard wooden seat and stared out the small window as they passed the Queen's Park. Mr. Binder's wagon was a delivery truck, so the inside was only one bench, which faced multiple wooden shelves where he stored his baked goods. But it was a way to get to the ball, and that was all she cared about. Her plan was to sneak in the way she had before, through the door that led to the kitchens. If anyone stopped her, she would say she'd become lost. She hoped no one would ask to see her invitation. The gas lamps were blazing on the front of Buckingham Palace. As they drew near, a line of black, elegant, handsome cabs formed a queue to drop their occupants off at the front of the palace. Seamus steered the old horse along the road between St. James Park and the palace, headed towards the Royal Mews. No one paid any attention to a bakery wagon. He pulled the carriage to a stop, hidden in the shadows under several low-hanging trees in an area of the side yard. Seamus climbed down and opened the door. "This is as close as I can get." "Is there anyone about?" Tiki asked. "It sounds like everyone's out front. There's a door propped open on the side of the building here." "That's it." Tiki gathered her skirt and lifted it so she could climb out the door. She hopped to the ground and shook out the folds of her gown, taking a deep breath to slow the wild beating of her heart. "Teak," Seamus's voice was soft. "Remember, you're more of a lady than anyone else in there tonight." Tiki leaned forward and kissed his cheek. "Thank you, Seamus. Wish me luck." She adjusted her mask, making sure it would stay firmly in place. "I'll try to hurry." Holding her head high, Tiki swept into the dim hallway that led to the immense kitchens, praying that no one would question her. She had never attempted a deceit this daring before. Once again, pots were banging amid the babble of conversation. Over it all, Tiki could hear the voice of the cook barking instructions. Tiki slowed as she neared the door, afraid of being seen. Then, with a deep breath, she drew herself up and walked by the door as if she owned the place. If anyone from the kitchen saw her, they didn't try to stop her, which gave her renewed confidence. She hurried along, following the swell of conversation that echoed in the distance. She took several wrong turns in the maze of hallways before she spotted a footman up ahead. "Excuse me," she said, her voice wavering with nerves. "I seem to have gotten turned around." The footman didn't make eye contact with her, which gave her an odd sensation of feeling invisible. Instead, he stared at the opposite side as he swung his arm out. "This way to the ballroom, miss." "Thank you." Tiki inclined her head as she glided by, wishing she could remain invisible for the rest of the night. After checking her mask one last time, Tiki moved into the larger room and followed a swell of beautifully dressed people toward the stairs. The sound of violins, cellos, and flutes wafted toward them from the ballroom upstairs. Women wore gowns of every color, from vibrant, rich satins to ethereal silks. The matching masks were adorned with gaudy feathers and sparkling sequins, making their owners look like exotic birds. Men were elegant in their black tails, wearing crisp white shirts with white cravats tied neatly under black vests. Tiki's fingers shook as she slid her hand along the shiny black handrail of the grand staircase, trying not to stare in awe at the glittering gold design of the railing. Above her on the walls, Life-sized pictures of the royal family were displayed, and she could feel the weight of their painted eyes as she passed underneath. Lessons she had learned as a young girl of how to stand straight and carry her head just so came back to her. Tiki straightened her shoulders as she tried hard not to stare at the glittering jewels on the ladies around her, knowing how easy it would be to lighten their burden without their knowledge. Not yet. She couldn't give in to the temptation until she had taken care of the real reason she was here. As she entered the ballroom, Tiki's jaw went slack. Her first impression was of a room created from gold. The walls and ceilings appeared to be carved from the stuff. Such was a quantity of embroidery, sculptured, guided trim high on the walls. Huge oil paintings framed in gilt were impressed between gold-trimmed windows. Gold moldings circled the room at multiple levels on the walls. Near the ceiling, luxurious paintings, images of cherubs danced among otherworldly beings with wings. The ceiling itself was divided into precise squares of gold, each painted and stair-stepped to a center containing an enormous sparkling chandelier ablaze with light. Beyond the din of people talking, the notes of an orchestra swelled from one corner as dancers swirled on the floor in an intricate movement of a quadrille. The sound of a piano blended with violins and horns and enveloped her with a wash of music. The rustle of silk and velvet, the sparkle of gold and jewelry, all glittered together like an exquisite painting come to life. Tiki patted her bodice, making sure that the small package she had hidden down the front of her dress remained in place. Her eyes scanned the exits as she worked her way around the perimeter of the room. Where could she hide the ring? It was with a measured pace that Tiki made her way through the door and down a hallway. Her eyes roamed over the huge paintings that lined the walls, as well as the tall orient vases and elegant furniture that filled the corridor. She was in a different part of the palace tonight. A small alcove set off to one side caught her eye. With a quick glance over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching, she slid behind the partially closed drapes. The small room looked out of view of a beautiful garden. Lit by hanging lanterns, 2 carved chairs were positioned adjacent to each other beneath a painting hung on the wall. Tiki caught her breath. In the painting, a man held his hand out to a woman. Her beauty was riveting, reminding Tiki of the blonde girl. But what truly caught her eye were the ethereal wings that adorned the woman's back, as thin and delicate as the wings of a dragonfly. Fairy wings? I didn't believe it either, Tiki. Reger's hushed voice came back to her. What did you see when Marcus touched you? What did you feel? Tiki's stomach lifted with a sickening motion. The wings she had seen in the alley that night, the wings that had been on Marcus's back, had a similar stained glass appearance as those in the painting before her. With a trembling hand, she ran her fingers along the glint frame of the picture. The wood had been carved in elaborate swirls of loops and curls. Tiki reached around the back of the corner of the frame. Behind the picture, she could feel a small nail used to hold the canvas in place. Tiki cast a cautious eye up and down the hallway, but there was no one to notice her hidden in the shadows behind the curtain. With a trembling hand, she reached down in front of her dress and retrieved the small package she had hidden there. Oh, pardon me, Tiki smiled at the woman she had just purposely bumped. I'm so sorry. Quite all right, dear, the older woman replied. The faded eyes behind her green velvet mask were a bit glassy as she raised her gauntlet and drank deeply. It's not a ball if we don't rub elbows a bit. She swayed slightly on her feet, her eyes narrowed at Tiki. Enjoy your evening, Tiki murmured as she patted her hair, letting the emerald earrings slide down her sleeve. As she moved away, she heard the woman gasp, and for a second Tiki thought she had already missed her jewels. Have you forgotten your crinoline, dear? Tiki dodged behind a stout man who reminded her of a penguin in his black and white dress clothes. She found herself trapped by people on all sides in the crowded room. May I offer you a drink? Tiki turned with a start. A servant inclined his head over a silvery tray. Oh yes, thank you. Tiki reached for the glass filled with dark red liquid. She took a sip and coughed, trying to catch her breath from the pungent flavor of the wine. Are you all right? A new voice inquired. Yes. Tiki coughed again, her eyes watering at the corners. I often have the same reaction to fine wine, a young man said. One corner of his mouth lifted as he gazed down at her. Tiki's stomach dropped like a rock in a pond. His chiseled face was partially hidden beneath the black mask. Though the mask was a simple cut, the quality of the embellishments suggested that this was a young man of means. The outside corners of the eye cutouts were shaded with glittering gold, and an intricate design of gold embroidery embellished the area above his eyes and down the center portion of his nose. A single black gem sparkled from the center amid the embroidery at the top of the mask. Would you like me to fetch you something different to drink? He stood straight and tall, impractically dressed in black trousers with a shirt, waistcoat, and cravat of the pursuit white silk covered by an overcoat of black tails. His gray eyes watched her with amusement through the slits in his mask. I don't, Tiki started. Perhaps a sweeter negus, he said. Or if not that, I can offer you some tea. Wills, you're not hiding this sumptuous tidbit from the rest of us, are you? A voice interrupted. A dark-haired young man turned. Oh, hello, Leo. A newcomer moved into view, and Tiki was surprised to recognize Prince Leopold, the youngest son of Queen Victoria. Though he wore a mask, his short brown hair and receding hairline were unmistakable. He was without a doubt the young man who had stopped her in the park. She dipped into a low curtsy, relieved the package was gone from the depths of her bodice. Leo reached for Tiki's hand and assisted her in straightening up. He inclined his head. You are breathtaking tonight, miss, and so cleverly disguised that I cannot discern your identity, but something tells me we have met before. He paused as though hoping Tiki would offer her name, but she remained silent. Therefore, I will be forced to call you the unknown beauty until I learn your true name. Another to your list of unknown beauties, Leo. Wills chuckled. How do you possibly keep them all straight? The prince turned to face the young man. Perhaps you could save me from this awkward moment, then, Wills, and introduce me to your friend. So you can sweep her away? What do you take me for, a complete fool? Leo laughed out loud. A contest for the hand of the unknown beauty, then? He nudged Wills in the ribs. At that moment, the orchestra struck up a waltz. Before Wills could respond, Leo turned to Tiki. Shall we dance? Oh, well, I'm not a very good dancer, Tiki stuttered. Nonsense, I'm sure you're an excellent dancer. Leo leaned close. And I'm an excellent dance partner. So between the two of us, I dare say we shall be fine. He took Tiki's glass and handed both drinks to his friend. "Will's old champ, would you be so kind?" Without waiting for a reply, Leo held out his hand and led Tiki into the swirl of dancers. Hours of dance lessons she'd been forced to endure came back to her as she followed the prince's lead. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Tiki stared at her feet and concentrated on counting, the waltz steps in her head, the familiar tune reminding her of practicing the dance with her father. Her dance instructor, Madame Broussard, had been the most intent that a waltz, or a valse, as she liked to call it, was an essential bit of knowledge for any properly brought up lady. A valse was the easiest dance to learn if you knew the simple steps. She had insisted. Tiki stumbled over Leo's foot and immediately felt a blush stain her cheeks. To practice before coming to a dance. How could she be so daft? "You're doing beautifully," Leo whispered in her ear. He whirled her around until her gown flared out with every turn, and Tiki began to enjoy the rhythm of the music. "I've danced with many," he rolled his eyes in a charming way. "Far too many ladies. Far too many of the ladies, and I can say with confidence that you are the better dancer of the group, and certainly one of the prettiest." "How very kind of you," Tiki replied. She was starting to enjoy the game she played. A prince of England was flirting with her. She couldn't wait to tell Fiona. What a laugh they'd have over this. "Please forgive my ignorance, but do I call you sir, your highness?" Her voice trailed off. "Just call me Leo. I don't need any fancy titles among friends." He gave her a warm smile. "Then tell me, Leo," she said, "do you pay such outrageous compliments to all your guests, or just those who need dance instruction?" "No, of course not." Leo pretended to look aghast. "I only fawn over those who can provide political advantage to the crown, those who might be related to the crown, and those who live on or near lands held by the crown. Let me see," he pretended to think. "Have I left anyone out?" Tiki giggled and shook her head. "No, I don't think so." "Good." Leo smiled at her. "Then perhaps I've earned my keep here for another day." He twirled her again, and then drew her close. "And how do I categorize you? Are we related?" "No," Tiki said. "But if we are to share confidences, tell me where your favorite places are in London." Leo frowned and regarded her for a moment. "Now that's a question I'm rarely asked." He paused to consider the answer as he swept her along in the dance. "There's the birdkeeper's cottage in St. James, a woman who has tended my mother the most of her lives there. Her husband was the birdkeeper for many years. It's surrounded by gardens and overlooks the lake. I like to ride out there when it's warm. The gardens are very picturesque, and you feel like you've escaped into another world." "That sounds wonderful," Tiki murmured. "And where else do you like to ride?" "Well, if you follow Rotten Row over in Hyde Park, you'll pass by the upside-down tree. Have you seen it?" "I don't believe I have." "Fascinating tree, and quite old. Some type of cypress than the sky, creating an umbrella effect. You can walk right underneath and be hidden from the world." "Surely your guards don't let you ride alone?" Leo grinned at her, his youth suddenly evident. "What they don't know won't hurt them. It's finding the time to escape my responsibilities and obligations that is the difficult part. He winked and lifted her arm to twirl her again. But one can't live life being followed and coddled all the time. The violins and piano swelled to a grand finale. As the waltz concluded, Tiki dropped into a deep curtsy. Thank you for the dance and the lovely conversation. She turned and made her way to the edge of the dance floor. She hadn't planned on dancing tonight, as if she'd actually been invited to the ball. Now that she'd placed the ring, she needed to get out, just as she told Seamus she would, and somehow managed not to get caught. But wait! Leah took a few hurried steps to catch up with her. You have not told me anything about yourself. How am I to discover who hides behind the mask if you don't give me any clues? What is your name? Tiki laughed. I'm quite sure there's nothing about me that you'd find interesting. She took a few more steps, then realized that this was her golden opportunity. With a coy look, she said, However, there is something about you that I find fascinating. Only one thing? Leo asked in mock disappointment. I've wondered why the palace has offered such a high reward for the queen's ring that has recently gone missing. Oh, the prince's expression hardened. You've heard of the ring? I just overheard some ladies talking about it, Tiki lied. Yes, well, it holds great sentimental value for my mother, and she wishes to have it returned. And it was stolen? Unfortunately, yes. We know where the ring was last seen, but we can't locate it now, and have to assume it had been taken. My mother is quite insistent upon having the ring returned, and believe me, Leo lowered his voice, you don't argue with my mother. Tiki walked along beside the prince, her hands clasped in front of her. Have you any clue what happened to it? No, Leo replied, his expression somber. The disappearance is quite worrisome, actually. He came to a stop at the edge of the dance floor and turned to face her. May I offer you something to drink? But you've offered a reward because you think it was stolen. A small frown flitted across his brow. Impossible though it seems, there's really no other explanation. We've questioned the staff and posted handbills, but it seems to have vanished. He eyed her with curiosity. Tell me again, how you know of it? I heard several ladies discussing it over there. Tiki pointed to a far corner of the crowded ballroom. Leo's gaze followed the direction she pointed, his eyes scanning the crowd. That's curious. He took 2 gauntlets from the tray preferred by the footman. Wine? Tiki nodded. She was treading on thin ice and would feel more confident holding something in her hand. It sounds like a great mystery. She gave Leo her best smile. But if the thief wanted to claim the reward, how would they return the ring without being arrested? Yes, well, that is a very good question indeed. Leo surveyed the crowded room again before he lowered his voice. I suspect the thief would somehow convey a message to one of the palace guards. Then we would negotiate the proper exchange of the ring for reward. He took a drink from his glass, letting out a content sigh. Now where were we? Yes, your name. Elizabeth. Tiki said the first name that popped into her head. Elizabeth. Leo sighed. A lovely name for a lovely girl. Elizabeth suits you. He peered closer at her mask. Did you know your eyes are a most unusual shade of green? They remind me of emeralds. Tiki smiled at him, thinking of the emerald earring tucked in the folds of her dress. Thank you, Leo. But tell me, she persisted, how would a thief contact a guard without being caught? I'm sure if you truly want the ring back, then you must have a system to exchange planned out. Leo sighed. I'm sure we can find more interesting topics of conversation other than thievery and blackmail, but being the gentleman I am, I will strive to satisfy your curiosity. There have been occasions in the past when we've exchanged goods in certain, shall we say, extreme situations, where a person sends a sealed note or letter that contains some identifying information that would suggest they are indeed in the company of an actual missing item. Near her ear. He leaned forward and put his lips near her ear. For instance, the missing ring has an inscription inside of the band that has never been publicly revealed. His eyes dropped to the low cut neckline of her dress and lingered there. At his words, Tiki was transported back in time. It was as if she stood in the library again, peering at the inscription inside the ring. Na Sishani Atamid, for the sake of peace we agree. She could see the flowing script inside the gold band reflected in the flickering light of the gas lamp perfectly. Leo took another sip of wine. Only someone who has handled the ring would have that information, he continued. So, should a person provide a letter claiming possession of the ring with the words from the inscription along with instructions of where to leave the large sum of money, we would be inclined to believe what they said, and most likely do as they ask. I see. Tiki nodded, trying to hide her elation without thinking. She took a sip of her drink and immediately started coughing again. The stuff was awful. Too much wine, a familiar voice spoke. Ah, Wills, there you are. Leo turned with a broad smile. And Isabel Cavendish. He nodded at the tall young girl in a striking blue dress. Her brown hair was uplifted in an elegant pile of curls, and a few stray strands of her hair dangled around the creamy skin of her narrowed face. Peacock feathers and their iridescent colors seemed reflected by her blue-green eyes. Leo, she said in a low, seductive voice, I've been wondering why you didn't invite Wills to your parties anymore. Her lips curved in a mischievous smile. I thought perhaps he'd left town. He's always invited, Leo chuckled. Getting him to show up is the challenge. I saw that the two of you took a turn on the dance floor. Leo's gaze traced the exotic feathers that adored Isabel's mask, then dropped briefly to the brilliant blue sapphires that glittered from her chest. You make a fetching pair, you know. Tiki caught the wink that Leo threw to the dark-haired young man, and she turned in curiosity to see his reaction. Actually, I'm anxious to make the acquaintance of this young lady as well. He inclined his head toward Tiki. Isabel shifted her gaze toward her, and Tiki was stunned by the malice in her eyes. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm William Baker Richenpold. Oh, allow me, Wills, Leo interjected. So sorry, I thought you two knew each other. This is Miss Elizabeth, He turned to Tiki, expecting her to fill in her last name. Instead, Tiki dipped into a deep curtsy. So pleased to meet you, Mr. Richenpold. She fought the panic that was fluttering in her chest. She needed to find a way out of this room, Too many questions, too much attention. There was something about the intensity of this dark-haired stranger that worried her, not to mention Isabel trying to burn her with her eyes. To her amazement, instead of returning her bow as she expected, the tall young man reached for her hand and took a firm grip. He lifted her fingers to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. "The pleasure is all mine," he said. Beside him, Isabel's lips pinched together in anger. As if in slow motion, Tiki watched his hand lift hers. The thick lace at the end of her sleeve fell back, revealing the dark swirls of her birthmark. For one long second, William Richenpold's gaze shifted to her wrist before his eyes turned to hers with startled surprise. The sound of wine glasses shattering on the marble floor disrupted the low hum of conversation as one heads turned to find the source of the noise. With a gasp, Tiki jerked her arm away, allowing the sleeve to cover her wrist again. Her eyes flickered over to Leo. He stood with his mouth ajar, his now empty hand still frozen in place. Leo's eyes were transfixed on her arm. "What is that mark on your wrist?" Leo's voice was faint as he raised questioning eyes to her. Panic stopped Tiki's breath in her throat. He recognized her. This was the only opportunity she was going to get to escape. "My gown!" she half-shrieked, staring down in horror at red wine splattered all over her skirt of gold dress. My apologies," Leo stuttered. His focus shifted to the reddish-purple stains on the front of her dress. "I don't know how the glass slipped out of my hand." Several footmen converged from different directions to clean up the mess. "I will certainly pay for the repair of your gown, Miss Elizabeth." "Excuse me, please," skirt of her gown, and hurried through the stunned crowd, praying the prince wouldn't follow her. Several of the women turned as if they might try to help, so she sped up. "Pardon me." Tiki shouldered her way through the crowd. "Sorry, excuse me." Tiki raced into the long hallway. She took a sharp turn to the right, then turned hard again, and hurried down the grand staircase, making a dash for the hidden servants' passageway that would lead to the exit by the kitchens. She dared one glance over her shoulder. No one followed her yet. She raced past the kitchens, and with a gasp, she exploded into the coolness of the night. It was all she could do not to scream Seamus's name at the top of her lungs. Tiki scanned the shadows beneath the trees, but a fog had moved in, making it difficult to see. She had to escape before the prince came and found her, or worse, his dark-haired friend. She hurried down the steps, her long gown floating behind her, and ran into the misty night. "Miss, wait!" a woman's voice called from behind her. "Are you lost?" Tiki raced on, pretending she hadn't heard. The queue of carriages that had delivered their passengers to the front of the palace now stretched along the side of the road that led to Royal Mews. Where was Seamus? She hurried toward the line of hansom cabs, her eyes searching the night for any sign of Binder's wagon. The pebbles on the courtyard hurt her feet, though through the thin soles of her slippers, but she welcomed the pain to help keep her alert. She was on dangerous ground right now in more ways than one. There, she saw Binder's wagon across the street, ready to depart at a moment's notice. "God bless Seamus," Tiki whispered as she ran. Seamus spotted her and slapped the reins, using the horse to move in her direction. The dark silhouette of their borrowed wagon, with the signs propped above the doors, was a welcome sight. Seamus pulled up on the reins, intending to dismount and help her into the carriage, but before he could move, Tiki waved him off. She reached up and yanked the door open. "Go, Seamus, go as fast as you can." She got one foot on the step and dove ungracefully into the wagon, falling to her knees on the floor. She didn't bother to get up. Tiki turned and gathered the trailing mounds of her gown, pulling the door closed. Outside, Seamus slapped the reins again, and the wagon jerked forward. As they clattered their way down the tree-lined lane of Buckingham Palace, disappeared from view, Tiki leaned her head back against the edge of the seat and let out a sigh. She danced with the prince, mingled with the artillery, and best of all, she'd hidden the queen's ring in the palace without getting caught. They were safe once again, safe from the royals, from Faze, maybe even from Riker. They couldn't take from her what she didn't have. A ripple of laughter erupted from her lips, and she had to cover her mouth for fear she would laugh hysterically until she cried. Tiki gathered her skirt and climbed onto the seat as Seamus drove them through the night toward Charing Cross. She closed her eyes, imagining the magnificent ballroom and beautiful gowns. All of it was like a glorious dream. She hummed along with the music in her head. Another shaky laugh escaped her lips as she thought of Leo. The look of shock on the prince's face when he saw her birthmark, it was almost laughable. The word thunderstruck suddenly took on a whole different meaning. And little did he know that he had provided her with the exact bit of information she'd needed to claim the reward for the ring. Suddenly, she sombered her happiness tainted with a sliver of fear. Leo had recognized her birthmark. She was sure of it. The expression on his face as she had stared at her arm made her stomach turn. But even if he did put together the fact that Elizabeth and the street urchin he'd met at the park were one and the same, it didn't matter. She tried to reassure herself, for the prince would never see her again. Tiki freed the emerald earring she had nicked from a small pouch she had created in the voluminous fabric of her dress. She examined the gem with a critical eye. Her work tonight had paid off handsomely. This would give them a good start toward being able to pay for Clara's care. Once she negotiated the reward for the return of the Queen's ring, they would never be hungry again.